Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and probably the review you've been wanting to hear my thoughts on ever since it dropped this past weekend, and that of course is Joker Folie, Deux, directed by Todd Phillips, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, Brendan Gleeson, and Catherine Keener. And this follows Arthur Fleck after the murders that take place in Gotham, and of course his nefarious stint on the Murray Franklin show. And now basically he's awaiting trial from the district attorney, aka Harvey Dent, and it follows him as he forms this budding romance with Lee Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga, and everything that goes on after the fact. This was a sequel that no one really wanted because the original Joker was supposed to be a standalone film, and then it made $1 billion at the box office, becoming the highest grossing R-rated film at the time. So DC's like, you know what? Let's get him back for more. And so they offered him a probably good sum of money, and he said, alright, I'll make something for you. And boy did he ever. So when I heard about this movie's existence in the first place, I was like, okay, I mean, I guess, but like, what are you really going to do? Like, that story was pretty complete. And then I heard it was a musical. I'm like, okay, this is a pretty bold swing. I think this could go horribly wrong, but, you know, let's see what he has to offer us. And then I heard it was a jukebox musical, which even tempered my expectations more. And then I heard all the reviews that came out, and I was like, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to feel about this, because I'm one of those people who errs on the side of positivity when it comes to the first Joker film. I love it. Obviously, it's fallen off in the 5 years since I originally saw it. I think the flaws become very evident with each viewing, but at its greatest moments, the feeling it gives me is something that only the best of cinema can offer. And I mean, there's so many iconic sequences in that. The staircase sequence, for one, is one that definitely comes to mind immediately. And I really loved the evolution of Arthur Fleck into the Joker. And this is not to say that I'm propping up these sorts of figures, which is something that we'll have to get into with this second movie here. But I do feel like his character arc was very natural and earned in that first movie, seeing what, you know, he turned into, basically a monster, because of how, you know, these institutions failed him and all that sort of stuff. I thought that was very effective. And the movie starts with him in Arkham Asylum, and I really did like a lot of the first part of this movie. That wasn't until he started singing For Once in My Life, which basically evaporated all the goodwill. Well, I won't say all, but that was when I really started questioning. I was like, is this going to be like this the whole movie? Like, is it going to be this distracting? And yeah, I could say that for the rest of the movie it basically was. Because Todd Phillips does not know how to direct a musical to save his fucking life. I mean, I'm sorry, this is not a good example of how a musical should be executed. Because a lot of people make the argument, well, in musicals they start singing randomly and it doesn't really make sense. But you can kind of anticipate it. You can kind of feel that they're setting it up to be that way. And I think a lot of times in musicals, the numbers, you know, push the story along and have something to say about what the character is going through. You hardly get that in Joker. And if you do, it's so distracting that it completely derails all the momentum that the movie's built. And that is very much the case with this film. Now, I'm going to get back into that a little bit, because before I, dogpile on this movie, let me give some of the positives and get that out of the way first. I think Lawrence Sher's cinematography is exceptional. This is one of the most vibrantly shot movies of the entire year, and I do think it is good enough to get a Best Cinematography nomination at the Oscars. Despite anything I'm going to say for the rest of this review, that is one consistent that I think is just absolutely top-notch. The filmmaking here you can't really knock. It is a technically very well-made film from that standpoint. And I also think Joaquin Phoenix stepping into the role of Arthur Fleck once again is fantastic. Obviously, it's not as great as his Oscar-winning work in the first film, but he definitely steps back into the shoes of this character very seamlessly, and he's always such a committed method actor, despite when he drops out of projects, but that's another story for another time. And I think this one is definitely not a performance where he phones it in whatsoever. Really appreciate him in this. And then Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn is very good as well, though I think very underdeveloped and underutilized. But, of course, she's really great in everything, so it's not a surprise that she's serviceable in this. And that's not to say that she's lacking by any means. I think that's more the film's problem and not her. I wish there was more of her, and I wish they utilized her character better. But besides the point, we'll get into that. I also thought Brendan Gleeson was very good in this movie when he's on screen. Not really sure how I feel about his character overall, but I definitely was liking the dynamic between him and Arthur Fleck at the beginning of this film. And so I can't really say any of the acting is bad at all. What else do I have to say about this movie? Quite a lot. I think that there are so many missed opportunities in the storytelling, and a lot of these musical numbers feel shoehorned in there because it's a musical. We have to have it, right? And it is just so unbelievably grating. Every time the musical numbers come up, even if some of them are technically very well shot and well made, it doesn't take away from the fact that they have no purpose of being there and are absolutely horrendous. I mean, they don't really add anything to what's going on in Arthur Fleck's mind because they all are from the perspective of his own psyche. But it doesn't feel like a natural progression into what he's feeling in the moment throughout this movie. And let's talk about that because this whole movie feels like such a redaction of the first film. And I get, like, we aren't supposed to be looking up to these characters, but why sort of revert everything that you've already set up? And that is probably the biggest issue I have with this movie because it is such a fucking pointless film. And that is why I hated Joker Folie à Deux. I think this movie is awful. I think this is one of the worst films of the year. I'm going to say it straight up. And I think it's because it definitely feels like an attempt at, one, a studio trying to cash in on a property and something that was done successfully and made them money. And two, a director basically giving a middle finger to the studio and basically saying, yeah, I'm going to go out of my way to make this so bad and as pointless as I possibly can just to piss you off and audiences as well. And look, you can make a statement about having to do something like that without it feeling ultimately futile. And that's exactly what Joker Folie à Deux is. And as much as the musical elements don't work and is horrendously shoehorned into this film, the courtroom drama stuff is, one, very stale for the most part, and two, it's just going over the same points we already did in the first film. A lot of people getting up on the testimony stand. It's just regurgitating what we already know happened in the previous movie, and there's only one scene that I think really gives a lot of perspective, and that is with Gary, one of his co-workers from the first film. And I thought that that scene was legitimately great. That was the best part of the whole movie, in my opinion, and I think most people are kind of agreeing with that assessment. And I think there are some really cool ideas in this movie, which feels weird, me saying how much I disliked this film, because there are great moments, especially an opening animated segment that kicks off this movie, which I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, this is really awesome, very creative, very visual. And that's the thing. Once again, I cannot knock the visuals in this movie. Other than that, I don't really think that it does anything to enhance the plot, enhance Arthur Fleck's story, and where he eventually ends up. And I also think the relationship between him and Harley Quinn really doesn't amount to much, and I suppose that is the point. But at the same time, I wish that that dynamic could have been fleshed out a little bit more, as opposed to feeling essentially very hollow by the end of this movie, and this is what this whole movie feels like. And I think trying to put all these different elements together, the musical, the dark and gritty realism of the first movie, it never comes together, and it falls completely flat on its face. And at the end of the day, there really was no point to make this film. And I think the ending of this movie is really going to divide fans, because a lot of people have been hating it, and I kind of hated it when I first watched it. Now, there are some things that I do appreciate what Todd Phillips is saying about the character of Joker himself, as opposed to Arthur Fleck, but it still feels like a futile effort in trying to make that point, where I really am just not a fan of how basically this whole character arc was deleted. That's how this whole movie feels. It definitely feels like he regretted making the first movie, which got him an Oscar nomination for Best Director, mind you. And look, I'm not saying that all filmmakers need to feel a certain way about that. But still, there was a reason the first one worked. And this one is just trying to do so many different things, failing at virtually all of them. And there's also so many random scenes that just come out of nowhere that did not add up to anything, did not pay off in any significant way, and just felt gratuitous by the end of this film. And I could go on and on about how much I hated this movie, but really I don't want to, because this felt like such a big waste of time, and I'm really upset that this movie exists. And I think Todd Phillips is too. But yet again, that's not an excuse to go out of your way and make a shitty movie. Like, that's really just absolutely ridiculous to me. As much as Joaquin is committed to this, I feel like Todd Phillips should have at least tried to come up with something creative and not something so subversive for the sake of it. I like to compare this to another one of the worst movies of the year, which I didn't even talk about, and it's called The People's Joker. So yeah, two of the worst movies are based on the Joker. And I feel like that movie is so poorly made, and everyone's like, oh, well, it's a great satire, and it's like, yeah, but like, look at it. It looks like shit. So I'm not saying that this movie looks like shit, but I like to compare it to that film, because I feel like just because you're going out of your way to make something poorly doesn't make it any better or self-aware. And I really don't know how this is going to stand up over time, because there are things I do appreciate about this movie the more I think about it and what he was trying to say, but I still don't think that is communicated across in any meaningful way that anyone is going to care about. And this is such an unnecessary and disappointing sequel. I mean, if you remember, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and this is probably one of the worst disappointments that I have had going to see a movie in a theater that I'm excited about in my whole time seriously watching movies. Like, this really was such a piece of crap, and I can't believe how much this movie fails miserably at so many different things. And yeah, I'm going to give Joker Folie a 3 out of 10. This is one of the absolute worst movies of the year. I'm really curious to hear what people are thinking about it, because there are some that appreciate the bold vision, I guess you could say, and also the middle finger to the studio, specifically Francis Ford Coppola, because that makes a lot of sense, right? And it's kind of funny that I ended up liking this less than Megalopolis, because at least Megalopolis I was having a fun time with, but this was just so hard to get through, and just continuously pissed me off at every step of the way. This really is such an abysmal film, and I really hope that you guys don't see this in theaters, because it doesn't deserve your support. I think this deserves to be a lesson to Warner Brothers, and I think I agree with Todd Phillips in that sense that they need to learn from failure like this. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on Joker Folie à Deux, but let me know what you thought down in the comments below. If you actually liked it, if you loved it, I'm really going to question why, but still I would love to hear why that is at the very least. And please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews. Next movie I'm going to be reviewing is Piece by Piece, the Lego documentary from Morgan Neville, based on Pharrell Williams. So be on the lookout for that and the other reviews coming very soon. I'll talk to you guys later.